Mistress called the millionaire. While he was with his pregnant wife, she heard everything. A single, startling ring cut through the calm of a late summer evening, echoing across the grand foyer of the Carrington estate. Marcus Carrington, the self-made millionaire whose composure was as legendary as his empire, glanced at the screen, and the man who'd mastered acquisitions felt, for the first time, utterly powerless. His pregnant wife, Vanessa, spotted the tension etched on his face. In that moment, a name neither of them wanted to hear spilled from his phone's speaker, Annalise Montgomery, Marcus's secret lover. One phone call, overheard at exactly the wrong time, threatened to unhinge not only their marriage but their entire world. Marcus Carrington often boasted that nothing caught him off guard. He'd built Carrington Financial from the ground up, transforming a small consultancy into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. His daily life was governed by routines and precisely timed schedules. That late summer evening, however, as he stood in the living room discussing baby names with his wife, Vanessa, his carefully orchestrated world teetered on the brink. The phone rang with a piercing clarity that set Vanessa's nerves on edge. She wasn't used to seeing Marcus flinch. He was the epitome of calm, the man who never hesitated, never revealed even a flicker of doubt. But something in his eyes shifted when he read the caller ID. "I'll be right back," he mumbled, stepping away, voice clipped. Vanessa, cradling her growing belly with one hand, watched him hurry toward the adjacent hallway. Her intuition flared he was hiding something. Against her better judgment she followed, footsteps silent on the polished floor. Vanessa, staying just out of sight, heard Marcus's murmured greeting. What came next made her blood turn to ice. A woman's voice, low and sultry, spoke his name with intimate familiarity. Each syllable dripped with possession. Vanessa's heart pounded so loudly she feared Marcus would hear it. She inched closer, flattening herself against the wall. The conversation continued in hushed tones, but she caught telltale phrases, references to a recent trip. A yacht, hush, hush rendezvous. Her stomach twisted into a knot, a swirl of disbelief and dread. Marcus whispered urgently, "I can't talk right now." But Annalise Montgomery Vanessa would only later connect the voice to that name pushed on, confident, unrelenting. She teased him for being secretive, mentioned the promises he'd made. Then, with a careless laugh, she said, "I still feel the taste of champagne from our last night together." Vanessa's knees threatened to buckle. In that raw moment, her world was split into a before and an after, and all the illusions she clung to began to crumble. The moment the call ended, Vanessa confronted Marcus with eyes blazing. She demanded answers. Pregnant or not, her fury was a force of nature. "Who was that?" she asked, voice trembling. Marcus hesitated, and in that pause, everything Vanessa feared solidified. A tear slid down her cheek. His silence was all the confirmation she needed. Still, he tried a flimsy defense. "It's just a misunderstanding," he lied, voice too quick, too rigid, nothing serious. Vanessa refused to let him off so easily. "You promised you were in London last month for a conference. Were you even there?" Her tone rose, echoing across the cavernous living room. Marcus paled, words failing him. His phone buzzed again, as if the universe had chosen that moment to hammer in the truth. "I won't lie," he finally said, eyes downcast. "I was with someone else. It was a mistake." Before Vanessa could unleash a storm of questions, the phone buzzed a third time. Marcus's gaze flickered to it, torn between damage control and a frantic desire to shield Vanessa from more hurt. The confrontation ended abruptly when she stormed out, tears threatening to choke her. Vanessa locked herself in the upstairs bedroom, ignoring Marcus's frantic knocks on the door. She clutched a pillow, burying her face as if it might muffle the anguish coursing through her. Betrayal felt like a dagger in her back, twisting with every new realization. She whispered to herself, "He cheated on me while I'm pregnant with his child." The words tasted bitter on her tongue. She flashed back to the day she told Marcus she was pregnant, how he'd lifted her in joy, the tears of excitement glimmering in his eyes. That memory now felt tainted, an illusion overshadowed by the voice on the phone. As minutes blurred into hours, she thought about whether to confront him again. Part of her longed for immediate answers. When did this affair begin? How many lies had she swallowed? Another part of her wanted to flee, to run from the living hell she found herself in. But the helpless kick in her belly reminded her she couldn't just escape. She had their unborn child to consider. Vanessa met Marcus when she was a junior marketing associate at a conference in Boston. He was the keynote speaker, a rising star in the finance world, known for his savvy deals and philanthropic endeavors. She had been charmed by his confidence, that rare balance of ambition and warmth. Over coffee breaks, they discovered a shared love for travel, antique literature, and quiet. Sundays spent reading. Their courtship felt like a fairy tale. Marcus whisked her away on weekend trips, showering her with thoughtful gifts, never the ostentatious trappings of wealth, but items that spoke to her interests, like a first edition of her favorite novel or a voucher for a local writing workshop. When he proposed at a small private beach, it seemed every star in the sky shone just for them. That memory now was like salt in her wounds. Their relationship had once been the envy of their social circle. How had it devolved into clandestine phone calls and lies? Marcus waited outside the bedroom, pacing the corridor, wearing a trench of anxiety into the expensive hardwood floors. His mind spiraled with self-reproach. In the harsh silence, he replayed every step that led him here, the impulsive attraction he felt for Annalise Montgomery, how he rationalized it as just harmless flirting at first. Then the business trip invites, the dinners that became more and more intimate. He'd never intended to betray Vanessa so profoundly. Yet one small step, then another, he found himself crossing lines he once swore he never would. When Vanessa announced her pregnancy, the jolt of reality made him consider ending things with Annalise. But he'd delayed, always finding excuses. And now, the monstrous burden of his indiscretion crushed him. He raised his fist to knock on the door again, but shame coiled around him. He had no explanation that could undo the pain he'd caused. He whispered through the door, "Vanessa, please, I'm sorry." But all that greeted him was silence. The next morning, Vanessa called her closest friend, Lydia Bishop, a sharp-witted attorney who had known Vanessa since college. Lydia arrived at the estate within the hour, greeting the staff with brisk nods as she made her way upstairs. Finding Vanessa teary-eyed and shaking, Lydia's protective instincts flared. "Tell me everything," she urged. Vanessa recounted the horrifying phone call, the partial confession, and the soul-crushing doubts that followed. Lydia's jaw tightened. She offered no sugarcoating. "We should verify the extent of this affair," she said calmly, though her eyes betrayed fury. "I can call in some favors private investigators if needed. But first, think about your health. This stress isn't good for you or the baby." Vanessa nodded, drained. She confided that she'd barely slept, consumed by nightmares of Marcus in another woman's arms. Lydia gave her an assuring squeeze on the shoulder. "Breathe. I've got you. We'll figure this out step by step." Across town, in a sleek penthouse suite at the Grand Marquette Hotel, Annalise Montgomery stared at her phone, perplexed. Marcus had abruptly ended their call the night before and wouldn't answer her subsequent texts. Rather than retreat, Annalise's confidence flared. She decided that she deserved clarity. Annalise was no stranger to affluence. Raised in a wealthy circle, she had long since learned how to maneuver social dynamics to her advantage. Marcus Carrington intrigued her because he seemed genuinely captivated by her intellect and not merely her looks. Over months of secret rendezvous, she'd grown convinced their connection was deep. His talk of what-ifs and some days whetted her appetite for a more permanent arrangement. Now, Faced with his radio silence, Annalise refused to be dismissed. She considered Marcus a man of power and influence, and she thrived on the thrill of capturing such a man's heart. "If he thinks he can ghost me," she murmured, "he's sorely mistaken." Vanessa finally unlocked the bedroom door in the early afternoon, feeling marginally steadier but still far from calm. She found Marcus in the dining room, nursing a coffee gone cold. Their eyes met in a tense silence. "I want answers," Vanessa began, voice quiet but resolute. "No more excuses, no more lies." Marcus looked haunted, a shadow of his usual poised self. "Her name is Annalise Montgomery. It started at a charity event in Los Angeles," he confessed, his words slow and halting. "I was pulled in, attracted, yes, but it was never meant to become this." Vanessa trembled with anger and heartbreak. "When I was sick those early months, when I had morning sickness so bad I could barely stand. You were with her. Did you even think about our child?" His expression contorted. "I never stopped caring about you. I just—" She cut him off. "Don't say you made a mistake. You made a choice." Vanessa retreated to the estate's library, a vaulted room lined with leather-bound tomes. She remembered how Marcus once surprised her there with a small string quartet for her birthday, playing her favorite Mozart concerto among the shelves of old books. The memory used to fill her with warmth. Now it stung. She drifted between the tall shelves, letting her fingertips brush dusty spines, trying to ground herself in something familiar. Tears threatened to overwhelm her again. She recalled how Marcus proposed, with a ring etched with their initials and the date they met. He'd said, "We'll face every challenge as a team." Where was that man now? The team they'd formed seemed to have disintegrated under the weight of his deceit. Vanessa pondered how swiftly love could morph into confusion and hurt. She felt trapped in a labyrinth of betrayal, longing for an exit but unable to see beyond the heartbreak. Diana Graves, the long-standing house manager who had served the Carrington family for over 2 decades, was not oblivious to the tension gripping the estate. She might have been soft-spoken, but her gaze missed little. Wiping down the counters, Diana heard raised voices. She'd always admired Vanessa's gentle heart and Marcus's ambition. Seeing them on the brink of collapse tore at her. She recalled Marcus as a teenager, grappling with the loneliness of losing his father at a young age. She remembered Vanessa's kindness when she first arrived as Marcus's fiancée, helping Diana in the kitchen despite not being asked. Diana silently prayed things would resolve, but the hush that followed each argument felt heavy with finality. Pausing in her task, she considered speaking up to comfort Vanessa, though she didn't want to overstep. With a resigned sigh, Diana placed the rag aside and went to check if Vanessa needed anything, her heart heavy with concern. By midday, Lydia cornered Marcus in his study, determined to speak her mind. She regarded him with steely eyes. "Let's cut the pleasantries. You hurt her badly." Marcus slumped in an oversized chair, pressing his palms together. "I'm aware," he said, throat tight. "I love her. I messed up. I got pulled into something I didn't know how to stop. Annalise made me feel admired. Not that it justifies anything." Lydia's jaw tightened. "Vanessa's health is at stake. Stress can affect the baby." She leaned forward, voice razor sharp. "You need to consider the implications if she decides to leave you, legal, financial, emotional. We have to ensure Vanessa's protected." His gaze flickered with panic. "Leave me? She can't. You've destroyed her trust," Lydia cut in. "Nothing is guaranteed. If you truly love her, you'll do whatever it takes to make this right, or at least lessen the fallout." Marcus nodded, emotion choking him. He was beginning to grasp just how precarious his situation really was. Later that afternoon, Marcus's phone buzzed with a blocked number. He knew who it was before he even picked up. Annalise's voice, smooth and insistent, came through the line. "You can't just vanish, Marcus. Talk to me. He swallowed hard. Analyze. I told you this can't go on. I made a promise to my wife. A frigid silence followed, broken by Annalise's subdued laughter. So that's it. You use me for months, and then drop me? Her fury crackled across the connection. I won't be shoved aside like your dirty secret. Marcus's pulse hammered. He glanced toward the closed door, aware that Vanessa could walk in at any time. He lowered his voice. I can't talk about this now. You'll talk to me, or I'll make sure Vanessa finds out even more. Don't underestimate what I know. The call ended abruptly, leaving Marcus in a cold sweat. Annalise had always been headstrong, but her threat was a new level of danger. The carefully constructed world he tried to mend was primed to explode. Night fell, cloaking the estate in silence. Vanessa lay in the guest bedroom, unable to bear sharing a bed with Marcus. She remembered how only weeks ago she'd be in his arms, whispering about baby names or future vacations. Now the warmth was replaced by a bitterness that gnawed at her. In her loneliness, she thought about the unborn child. Every flutter, every kick reminded her of the responsibility looming before her. Could she endure this heartbreak for the sake of her child, or would a bitter household be worse than a single-parent home brimming with love? She envisioned raising her baby alone, forging a fresh path free from deceit. Then she thought of the father-child bond she could be depriving her baby of, and her resolve wavered. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She felt betrayed, not just by Marcus, but by life's cruel twist. She believed wholeheartedly in the sanctity of marriage, and yet here she was, pregnant, uncertain, and frightened. Marcus knocked softly on the guest room door around midnight, voice trembling. "Vanessa?" She contemplated ignoring him, but after a lengthy pause, she replied, "What?" He stepped inside cautiously. The moonlight through the window revealed her puffy eyes, the tracks of tears glistening against her cheeks. Marcus sank to the floor by the bed. "I can't sleep," he admitted. "I'm so ashamed. I don't even know how to begin making this right." Vanessa stared at the ceiling, silent for a few moments. "Why now?" she finally asked, voice raw. "Why choose to tell me half-truths only after you get caught? What else are you hiding?" Marcus clenched his jaw. "That's all of it. The affair is done. I want it over." She let out a humorless laugh. "You think an affair like that just ends because you say so? Do you realize what you've done?" He couldn't answer. The weight of her devastation pressed on him like a physical force. Before he could attempt an apology, she rolled over, back turned. The following day, Vanessa had a routine prenatal appointment. Lydia insisted on accompanying her. Marcus offered to drive, but Vanessa refused. The tension between them was palpable as they left the estate in separate cars. Inside the clinic, Dr. Rebecca Talwar performed an ultrasound, her expert eyes scanning the monitor. The gentle rhythm of the baby's heartbeat filled the room, a sound that momentarily calmed Vanessa's stormy mind. After taking some measurements, Dr. Talwar studied Vanessa closely. "Your blood pressure's higher than normal," she said, her tone laced with concern. "It could be stress-related. Try to rest more and avoid emotional strain if you can." Vanessa forced a nod. Avoiding emotional strain seemed impossible. The stress was already embedded in every corner of her life. She left the office with fresh worry. If her turmoil affected the baby's health, she'd never forgive Marcus or herself. Word of the Carrington household troubles eventually reached Marcus's mother, Eleanor Carrington, who lived in a quiet retirement community by the sea. Though elderly, Eleanor was sharp-minded and fiercely protective of her son's marriage. She summoned Marcus to her place, refusing to accept excuses. Marcus arrived to find her in the sunroom, wrapped in a pastel shawl. She greeted him with a piercing gaze. "You've gotten yourself into quite the scandal," she said, voice subdued yet stern. He flinched, acknowledging her disappointment. "I messed up, Mother. It got out of hand." She gestured for him to sit. "Vanessa is carrying your child. I don't need the details, but I do know betrayal when I see it. You must make amends if you can." "Our family name has seen enough tragedy," she said, remembering Marcus's late father. "This is not just about reputation, but about respect and decency." Marcus felt the sting of her words. He promised he would do whatever it took, even though fear gnawed at him that it might already be too late. True to her pragmatic approach, Lydia discreetly hired a private investigator, Glenn Roberts. The aim was not to drag out scandal, but to gather facts. How long had Marcus been seeing Annalise? And were there any financial entanglements that might harm Vanessa? Glenn's investigation unearthed reservations at high-end hotels, lavish dinners, and even a weekend yacht rental in the Caribbean. Photographic evidence showed Marcus and Annalise, arm in arm, looking every bit the smitten couple. The dates coincided with times Marcus had told Vanessa he was on business trips. Lydia carefully relayed the findings to Vanessa. The revelations, though validating her suspicions, tore new wounds in her already battered heart. On top of it all, the Pi discovered that Annalise was known in certain social circles as an heiress hunter, someone adept at finding wealthy partners, though her own background was plenty affluent. Vanessa felt ill, realizing Marcus had stumbled right into a trap. Whether he was willing or oblivious didn't matter. The damage was done. Devastated by the magnitude of his actions, laid bare in the investigator's report, Marcus decided to make a public stand. He confronted Annalise outside her downtown apartment complex, desperate to end things conclusively. She emerged from a black town car, dressed impeccably as always. Spotting Marcus, her expression switched from surprise to cool amusement. "You look terrible," she remarked, running a manicured finger through her hair. Marcus steeled himself. "This has to stop." Annalise's eyes narrowed. "I told you before, you don't just turn off what we had. Not after all those times you came to me, confided in me." He grimaced, recalling foolish moments of vulnerability he'd shared, perhaps misreading lust for comfort. "I made a mistake. I love my wife. I have to protect my family." She smirked. "Well, that's your choice, but don't expect me to vanish quietly." Her laughter trailed behind her as she sauntered into the building, leaving Marcus more anxious than ever. In the days that followed, Vanessa found herself sifting through old photo albums, searching for clues on how her life could have taken such a turn. She stumbled upon pictures from early in their relationship, the day trip to the countryside, their first holiday party at Carrington Financial. She traced Marcus's smile. In the photographs he looked genuinely happy, unburdened. She also dug deeper into Marcus's past, recalling half-forgotten anecdotes he'd mentioned about trust issues stemming from his father's infidelity. Had that unhealed trauma contributed to his own moral failings? She wrestled with the irony. He once promised her he'd never repeat those familial mistakes. When Lydia returned with yet another update from the Pi hints that Annalise might plan to expose more details to the press, Vanessa's chest tightened. She remembered how protective Marcus had always been of his family's privacy. Now, their most intimate failures threatened to become tabloid fodder. Late one afternoon, Diana Graves found Vanessa in the garden, absently plucking at wilting roses. The older woman approached gently. "Miss Carrington," she said, voice laced with concern, "is there anything I can do?" Vanessa didn't flinch at the intrusion. Instead, she sighed. "I feel so lost." Diana placed a tentative hand on Vanessa's shoulder. "I've watched you and Mr. Carrington build a life here. You two seemed so strong." Vanessa blinked back tears. "That's what I thought. But apparently it was built on lies. Or maybe I just never saw the cracks forming." Diana hesitated, struggling between loyalty and compassion. "People make mistakes," she murmured. "Sometimes terrible ones. But you have a child on the way. It's worth asking whether this family can still mend." Vanessa nodded, uncertain. She appreciated Diana's kindness, but the question lingered, could she ever forgive a betrayal that cut so deep? Amid the turmoil, Marcus reached out to Dr. Albert Hoffman, a renowned marriage counselor recommended by one of his board members. Surprisingly, Vanessa agreed to attend an initial session, albeit warily. In the therapist's softly lit office, a gentle water feature gurgled in the corner, creating a veneer of calm that contrasted sharply with the tension between husband and wife. Dr. Hoffman began by asking them to recount their earliest memories of each other, reminding them of the foundation of their relationship. Vanessa described their first coffee date, how Marcus made her laugh with stories about financial clients who had bizarre requests. Marcus recounted feeling an electric sense of possibility when he first saw her bright smile. Then came the harder questions. What led Marcus to seek comfort in another woman? How long had Vanessa felt something was amiss? The session stirred heartbreak and hope in equal measure. By the end, tears flowed freely, but so did a sliver of understanding. Just as they began therapy, the media's interest in the Carrington affair intensified. A local gossip column, Inside Whitebridge, published a scathing piece alluding to Marcus's illicit affair with an enigmatic socialite. Though the article withheld names, the descriptions made it clear who the parties were. Photographers loitered outside the estate gates, waiting to snap pictures of a distraught Vanessa or a remorseful Marcus. Their presence rattled the staff and turned every trip out of the house into a tense ordeal. Vanessa loathed the intrusion, fear gripping her whenever she had to go to the doctor or run an errand. Each flash of a camera felt like a violation. Marcus, furious but also helpless, boosted security. He gave strict orders that no one was to be allowed onto the property without clearance. Yet the paparazzi were relentless, feeding off the possibility of capturing a meltdown or confrontation. To strategize, Lydia and Glenn Roberts met with Vanessa one evening. Marcus, in a show of solidarity, joined them. They gathered in the study, an unlikely war room for such personal drama. Glenn spread out folders containing evidence of Annalise's communications and possible next moves. "She's been in contact with at least 2 tabloid freelancers," he said, tapping on a highlighted line of text. "Likely bargaining for an exclusive story." Vanessa's face paled. She pressed a hand to her abdomen protectively. "We can't let her do that. This will destroy us, and our child shouldn't be born into a media circus." Lydia sipped her tea, eyes narrowed. "Legally, we can't stop her from speaking out unless we can prove defamation. But if it's true, it's not defamation." Marcus exhaled shakily. "I'll pay her off if I have to," he said, desperation clinging to his words. Vanessa stiffened at the thought of hush money. She wanted the fiasco to end, but the notion of using money to cover his sins made her stomach churn. Marcus couldn't sleep. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw Vanessa's tear-streaked face, or he heard Annalise's mocking laughter. The guilt weighed on him like an anchor. He had always prided himself on being a problem solver, someone who tackled obstacles methodically. But this emotional quagmire defied all his business instincts. He wandered through the house at night, recalling happier times. In the foyer, he pictured Vanessa, radiant after he proposed. In the library, he remembered reading her favorite poetry. Even the kitchen stirred memories of them cooking together, laughter echoing off marble countertops. At one point, he paused at the nursery they were preparing. Pale yellow walls and a half-assembled crib awaited their child. Marcus ran a hand over the crib's rail, tears stinging his eyes. He whispered a broken apology into the silence, wondering if the child he was about to meet might someday hate him for the pain he inflicted on their mother. Vanessa awoke before sunrise, determined to reclaim control. She found Marcus in the kitchen, fiddling with the espresso machine. He appeared haggard, as though he hadn't slept in days. "Marcus," she said, voice steeled with purpose, "I've made a decision." He turned, dread washing over his features. "What is it?" She drew a breath. I'm willing to continue therapy and see where it leads on one condition. You must end all communication with Annalise immediately and permanently. No hush money, no clandestine phone calls. If she threatens to go public, we'll face it together. He hesitated. And if she talks? Vanessa's eyes flashed with resolve. Then we confront that storm together. But you can't keep playing both sides. If I find out you contacted her in any way behind my back, we're done. Do you understand? A wave of relief mixed with fear coursed through him. I promise, he said, voice trembling, I'm done with her. That very morning, Marcus composed a short, definitive email to Annalise, stating there would be no further contact. He blocked her number on his phone, unfollowed her on social media, and ensured his personal assistant was aware that any attempt on Annalise's part to reach him should be rejected. In a fleeting moment of weakness, he almost dialed her number, perhaps to offer some personal closure, to say a final goodbye. But Vanessa's ultimatum echoed in his mind. He couldn't afford another misstep, not if he was serious about salvaging his marriage. For a man used to controlling every aspect of his life, severing contact felt oddly like losing. Yet he recognized that continuing any relationship, even a simple phone call, could irrevocably destroy what little trust Vanessa had left. Despite blocking her, Annalise wasn't one to concede easily. She appeared at Marcus's office unannounced. The receptionist, flustered, tried to stall her, but Annalise glided past with practiced confidence. Security guards rushed in, but she demanded to speak to Marcus. Marcus emerged from a meeting to find Annalise in the lobby, an elegant storm of fury. Your staff is treating me like a criminal, she hissed. You owe me a conversation. He kept his composure, though his heart thumped violently. I told you, we're done. Please leave. Her eyes gleamed with hurt and rage. I gave you everything. I was there when you needed an escape. Is that worth nothing? The tension in the lobby was thick enough to slice. Employees gawked from behind desks and glass partitions. Marcus gestured for the guards. Escort Miss Montgomery out, please. As she was led away, she hurled one final barb. Don't think I won't remember this, Marcus. Actions have consequences. Vanessa and Marcus continued their therapy sessions with Dr. Hoffman. In one particularly intense meeting, Dr. Hoffman asked Vanessa to describe, in explicit detail, the pain the affair caused her. Vanessa, hands clenched, poured out her devastation. I felt worthless, like I wasn't enough, especially while pregnant. I imagined him choosing someone else over me at a time when I needed him most. Her voice broke. That image haunts me. Marcus's eyes brimmed with tears. Hearing her articulate the extent of her anguish was almost unbearable. He confessed feelings of guilt, self-loathing, and fear that he'd become like his unfaithful father. Dr. Hoffman guided them to acknowledge each other's pain without defensiveness. Acknowledgement is the first step toward rebuilding trust, he said calmly. Marcus, look Vanessa in the eye and apologize without qualification. Marcus obeyed, a trembling sincerity in his voice. Vanessa accepted his words, but made it clear that time would tell if the apology held real weight. Meanwhile, speculation about the scandal continued online. Anonymous tips claimed Annalise was shopping a tell-all interview to gossip channels. Vanessa deliberately avoided reading the tabloids, but curious acquaintances occasionally forwarded her articles laden with half-truths. At a brunch with old school friends, she found herself bombarded with sympathetic inquiries and unsubtle prodding for salacious details. She politely deflected, forcing a smile she didn't feel. Inside, she felt raw, humiliated that the world had become a voyeur to her marriage's darkest moments. Some friends offered genuine concern while others reveled in the drama, whispering behind her back about how even the perfect marriages can fall apart. Vanessa left early, her chest tight. She realized that no matter how strong her resolve, she was fighting a war on multiple fronts, within her marriage, within herself, and within a ruthless public sphere hungry for gossip. As weeks passed, Marcus and Vanessa found small ways to reconnect. They began sharing quiet breakfasts, discussing mundane daily schedules. Sometimes they even laughed at old inside jokes, though the laughter often ended in a sad, questioning silence. One afternoon, they took a short walk around the grounds, autumn leaves crunching beneath their feet. Vanessa spoke of her hopes for the baby, how she wanted to be the kind of mother who was both nurturing and strong. Marcus listened, genuinely engrossed. He shared his fears, how he worried he'd never be a good father, that his betrayal had somehow stained the family he wanted to build. Vanessa didn't reassure him. She simply listened. Later that evening, she told Lydia about the walk. "It's tentative," Vanessa said, "but it's something. We have to remember what brought us together in the first place, or there's no hope." Lydia nodded, sensing that while healing was possible, it was far from guaranteed. Glenn Roberts dug deeper into Annalise's background. He discovered that her late father had squandered a sizable portion of the family inheritance, leaving her mother to rebuild. Annalise grew up witnessing financial instability masked by outward appearances of wealth. Possibly, her pursuit of affluent men stemmed from a fear of ever returning to that state of vulnerability. This didn't absolve her role in the affair, but it painted a portrait of someone driven by underlying anxieties and learned opportunism. Glenn explained to Lydia and Vanessa that Annalise rarely formed emotional attachments unless they guaranteed material security. She left a trail of heartbroken and significantly poorer ex-partners in her wake. Vanessa absorbed the information in grim silence. It pained her to think Marcus had fallen into such a cliché, but part of her also felt a twisted pang of empathy. "She's dangerous," she said softly, "but she's also broken." Despite the tension, a baby shower had long been planned by Vanessa's relatives. They decided to go forward, hoping a joyful event might provide respite from the ongoing chaos. Close friends and family gathered in the estate's garden, decorated with pastel streamers and balloons. Vanessa tried to focus on the celebration, greeting guests with polite smiles. Marcus made a brief appearance, offering warm, if subdued, thanks to those who brought gifts. The mood was cheerful on the surface, but an undercurrent of unease fluttered among the attendees who knew the rumors. Midway through the event, a small group of paparazzi managed to snap photos over the garden fence. Their cameras clicked furiously, capturing the tension in Vanessa's eyes. Security chased them off, but the damage was done. The next day, tabloids ran headlines like "Baby Joy" in the midst of betrayal. Vanessa was furious, yet powerless to stop them. In a private moment after the baby shower, Lydia spoke bluntly to Marcus. "You need to step up more than you have. Vanessa shouldn't be dealing with the press alone. Where have you been?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "I'm trying to repair my relationship with her. I figured giving her space at her shower was for the best." Lydia shook her head. "She needed you by her side, showing everyone you're committed. This isn't just about giving her space. It's about proving to her and to the world that you're unwavering in your support." Marcus felt a pang of shame. I thought I was doing what she wanted. Ask her. Talk to her. Don't guess. We're past guesswork." Lydia's words struck home. He realized he'd been treading lightly out of guilt rather than openly communicating. If he wanted redemption, he had to be more transparent and present than ever before. Sometime in late autumn, Vanessa reached a crossroads. The baby was due in a matter of weeks, and the emotional roller coaster had left her drained. She told Marcus they needed a serious, uninterrupted conversation. They sat in the drawing room, the fireplace crackling softly. Vanessa's hands trembled. "Marcus," she began, voice quivering, "I'm nearing my limit. I can't be in a constant state of suspicion or heartbreak." He swallowed hard. "I understand," she continued. "Doctor Hoffman asked me what I need from you. I've been thinking about it. I need honesty, complete, unfiltered honesty. I need to know there are no more secrets, no more hidden accounts or phone calls. And I need to see consistent action that shows you're truly sorry." Marcus nodded, tears at the corners of his eyes. "I promise, Vanessa. I'll give you everything, financial records, phone logs, whatever you need." She let out a tremulous breath. "Then let's see if we can fix what's left, for our child's sake, if nothing else." True to his word, Marcus laid out all his financial statements, business travel logs, and personal phone records for Vanessa to review. The gesture was part confession, part desperate bid for transparency. Vanessa pored over them, heart in her throat. She saw the lavish hotel suites and the precise dates that overlapped with her pregnancy's toughest moments. Late-night calls charged to a business account, gifts purchased at high-end boutiques in Los Angeles. It was overwhelming, and at times Vanessa had to step away to calm her racing thoughts. But each piece of evidence, though painful, chipped away at the unknown. For the first time in months, she felt some semblance of control. She was no longer left in the dark. Marcus hovered anxiously, wanting to explain every detail, but he respected Vanessa's space, recognizing that his words might sound like excuses. Seeing the undeniable, stark record of his betrayal was sobering. Any illusions he harbored about minimizing his wrongdoing vanished. As winter crept in, the estate transformed under a blanket of softly falling snow. Vanessa's due date loomed, and she found her emotions swinging between cautious optimism and lingering resentment. Marcus took time off work to be there for her, driving her to appointments, setting up the nursery, and even assisting with childbirth classes. Their progress was fragile but tangible. The tension persisted, yet moments of genuine connection resurfaced. One evening, Marcus helped Vanessa onto the porch swing so they could watch the snow drift down in silence. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "If only for a minute," he whispered. "I'm here, Vanessa. I'm not going anywhere." She nodded, but caution flickered in her gaze. Too many promises had been broken. Still, the gentle hush of snowfall lent a temporary serenity, hinting that maybe, just maybe, there was a path forward. Annalise Montgomery had been quiet for weeks. However, she made a last-ditch move, contacting a tabloid with photographic proof of her and Marcus together, candid shots from the Caribbean yacht trip. She claimed she had explicit text messages detailing the affair. The tabloid teased these revelations, planning to release a bombshell article. Vanessa braced herself when word reached them. Marcus appeared ready to fight tooth and nail, but Vanessa did something unexpected. She asked him to let it happen. "I'm done living in fear," she said, hand on her swollen belly. "If she publishes those photos, let the world see. We'll handle the fallout. I don't want any more hush money or secrets. We face this head on, or we don't face it at all." Marcus nodded slowly, though anxiety rippled in his expression. He realized that transparency now extended to the public arena. This time, he stood by Vanessa's decision, determined to weather the storm at her side. Sure enough, the article hit the web a week later, complete with damning photos. The headline blared, "Marcus Carrington's Double Life, Mistress Tells All." The piece framed Marcus as a callous philanderer, though some of Annalise's claims were embellished or outright false. Vanessa's phone lit up with messages of sympathy and curiosity. Social media buzzed. The press camped outside their gates again. Marcus prepared a short statement, acknowledging a past indiscretion but pledging his commitment to rebuilding trust within his marriage. Behind closed doors, Vanessa wept at the public humiliation. Marcus cradled her as she sobbed, his own tears falling silently. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I put you through this." But the remarkable thing was that once the initial shock wore off, Vanessa felt a peculiar sense of relief. Now the truth was out. No more skeletons in the closet. In an odd way, she felt lighter, unburdened by hidden truths. Shortly after the article's release, Vanessa went into labor, almost 2 weeks earlier than expected. The chaos of the scandal melted away in the face of a far more urgent reality, the birth of their child. Marcus grabbed the hospital bag, hastily helping Vanessa into the car. In the delivery room, hours blurred. Pain, fear, and excitement wove together in a frantic tapestry. Marcus held Vanessa's hand, wiping sweat from her brow, whispering encouragement. Every contraction felt like a test of her resolve, but she clung to the determination that she'd endure anything for her baby. In the quiet dawn, cries of a newborn filled the room. A baby girl, her tiny lungs proclaiming her arrival. Vanessa collapsed into tears of relief, exhaustion, and joy. Marcus gently cradled the infant, overcome by a surge of love so fierce it stole his breath. In that moment, no scandal, no betrayal could overshadow the miracle of new life. They named her Isabella Grace Carrington. The doctors wrapped her in a soft pink blanket, and Vanessa marveled at the tiny fingers curled around her own. Marcus watched from the bedside, tears streaming freely. "She's perfect," Vanessa whispered, cheeks damp with emotion. "So helpless, and yet so strong." Marcus nodded, leaning in to kiss his wife's forehead. He found himself speechless, the magnitude of fatherhood washing over him. Every regret, every misdeed, felt amplified by the sight of this fragile new life he was responsible for. A nurse offered polite congratulations before stepping out, leaving the small family in a cocoon of soft, fluorescent light and profound tenderness. In that shared silence, they began to sense that maybe, amid the wreckage, they could forge a path forward for Isabella's sake. The postpartum period proved challenging. Vanessa wrestled with exhaustion, fluctuating hormones, and the demands of caring for a newborn. Marcus tried to assist in every way possible, changing diapers, late-night feedings, but the underlying tension sometimes resurfaced. Vanessa struggled with conflicting emotions. She would look at Marcus, doting on Isabella, and feel a rush of gratitude, only to be slammed by a memory of his affair moments later. The internal tug-of-war tore at her. She worried about postpartum depression, confiding in Lydia that some days she felt like she was drowning. Lydia urged her to lean on therapy and, if needed, seek medical advice. "You've been through a monumental trauma," Lydia said gently. "Healing won't be linear or simple, but you're not alone." Marcus tried to be understanding, though he felt helpless. Every time Vanessa winced at a passing memory, he was reminded of how deeply he had wounded her. Weeks turned into months, and gradually a new normal took shape. Marcus returned to work part-time, dividing his hours between the office and home. Vanessa embraced motherhood with a fierce devotion, channeling her energy into nurturing Isabella. They maintained therapy sessions, delving deeper into root causes and patterns of communication. There were setbacks, arguments triggered by a stray comment or a suspicious glance at Marcus's phone. But there were also victories, a relaxed dinner shared while Isabella napped, an impromptu dance in the living room where, for a brief moment, they laughed like they once had. Through tears and therapy, confessions and compromises, they inched toward rebuilding trust. Vanessa remained guarded, but each day she saw glimpses of the man she once loved. Marcus, for his part, recognized the enormity of her decision to stay. He vowed to spend the rest of his life proving her faith in him wasn't misplaced. A year after Isabella's birth, on a crisp winter morning, Vanessa stood at the edge of the estate's frozen lake, cradling her daughter. Marcus joined them, breath misting in the cold air. Together, They gazed across the surface, recalling how different their lives were just 1 year ago. A swirl of emotion filled Vanessa: anguish, gratitude, and a sense of cautious hope. Marcus gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry," he whispered again, though now it felt less like a desperate plea and more like an acknowledgement of their shared past. Vanessa turned to him, tears in her eyes. "I know," she said softly, pressing Isabella's small hand against his. "I know you're trying." He looked at his daughter, then at his wife. In that moment, he felt an overwhelming flood of love, tinged with remorse for the pain he'd caused. But in Vanessa's eyes, he saw the faint glow of acceptance, suggesting that while the past couldn't be erased, the future was theirs to redefine. Over time, the scandal faded from the headlines. Annalise moved on to new social circles, her name only surfacing occasionally in whispered rumors. For Marcus and Vanessa Carrington, life marched forward, messy, complicated, but also enriched by a depth they hadn't possessed before. Their marriage wasn't the same as it once was. It carried scars of betrayal and heartbreak, yet in its vulnerability, it also gained a raw authenticity. They learned to communicate openly, to voice fears before they festered. They discovered the power of genuine apology and the fragile gift of tentative forgiveness. Isabella served as a living reminder of what they stood to lose if they gave in to bitterness. Some days were good, others were tough, but each morning they awoke to try again. In that persistent effort lay a delicate, earnest hope, a hope that the worst phone call of their lives might ultimately pave the way for a deeper, more honest love. Marriage can buckle under the weight of betrayal, but it can also endure with the grit of honest effort. In the aftermath of Marcus Carrington's infidelity, he and Vanessa stood at the brink, yet the unyielding bond of parenthood and a glimmer of rediscovered affection guided them forward. Pain, anger, and regret demanded they tear down every illusion and start over from rock bottom. Through arduous therapy sessions, countless apologies, and a newborn who became both a tether and an inspiration, they dared to rebuild what had been broken. If this emotional roller coaster gripped your heart, don't let the story end here. Show your support by liking this video, sharing it with those who appreciate real-life drama, and subscribing for more riveting narratives that dive into the raw essence of human relationships. Join us for more stories that remind us how fragile and how extraordinary love can be. Millionaire deleted his wedding photos and hung a portrait of his pregnant wife crying. Caroline Alden's tears glistened under the chandelier's glare, framing her face in a storm of heartbreak. Her husband, Nicholas, stood stoic, having just committed an unimaginable act. He deleted every last photo from their wedding. Witnesses would later whisper about the chill in the air, how even the rose bouquets seemed to wilt under the tension. No one could fathom why a millionaire adored by the public and envied by men would destroy the memories of his own marriage. But as secrets unraveled and betrayals surfaced, one truth became clear: illusions always come with a price. Darkness hovered in every corner tonight. Nicholas Alden was a man accustomed to glittering success. At just 32, he had amassed more wealth than most people see in a lifetime. Friends from his alma mater, Princeton University, recalled how he'd speak of multi-million-dollar deals as casually as one might discuss the weather. His business acumen was legendary in circles of elite investors, and he'd earned a reputation for turning failing companies into gold mines. At charitable galas across Manhattan, he was the center of attention, never shy with his fortune, always appearing in custom-tailored suits. Caroline, on the other hand, was the epitome of grace. Having grown up in a modest suburb of Connecticut, she was initially overwhelmed by the whirlwind of high society that Nicholas introduced her to. Her kind spirit and grounded nature, however, quickly endeared her to those around him. She had studied art history at Yale and once dreamed of curating for top museums. Life with Nicholas offered wealth, prestige, and the opportunity to mingle with notable figures like the Rothschild heirs and celebrities such as Paris Hilton at exclusive soirees. Still, she never forgot her simpler roots. The wedding between Nicholas and Caroline had been as lavish as one might expect. A sprawling countryside estate, fireworks that lit the night sky, and a renowned chef brought in from Italy to delight the taste buds of their 500 guests. The entire event seemed pulled from the pages of a luxury magazine. Yet, if anyone looked closer, they might have noticed the flickers of tension behind Nicholas's confident smile. The controversy began quietly in the days following the wedding. As guests recovered from the opulence, still dazzled by the gold-trimmed invitations and rare vintage wines, Caroline sensed something was off. Nicholas grew distant, retreating to his home office for long, silent hours. He was no stranger to working overtime, but there was an urgency in his manner that felt different now. Whenever she asked, he brushed off her concerns, attributing his moodiness to business headaches. Their wedding photographer, a famous portrait artist turned photographer named Lucia Marconi, delivered the proofs in an ornate leather-bound album. Caroline felt an almost childlike excitement as she flipped through the photos, her father walking her down the aisle. The moment Nicholas turned around to see her in her wedding gown, the tearful exchange of vows. Each image pulsed with memories of love and hope. She couldn't wait to show Nicholas, who was holed up in the study with his laptop. Clutching the album, Caroline gently knocked on the door. When she entered, she found him hunched over a flurry of spreadsheets. The tension in his posture made her hesitate. Still, he looked up, forcing a half smile. "Look," she whispered, opening the album on his desk. "Lucia did an incredible job." He ran a hand through his hair. "Beautiful," he muttered. Before she could gauge his reaction, his phone rang some urgent call from an associate in Hong Kong. Caroline's hope deflated like a balloon losing air, unaware that this benign moment would soon erupt into a nightmare. As the weeks passed, Nicholas's distant attitude hardened into something more troubling. He slept less, drank more, and paced the marble floors of their penthouse. Caroline's attempts to console him were met with impatient shrugs. Occasionally, in the dead of night, she would find him staring at his reflection in the mirror, wearing an expression she couldn't decipher, part regret, part fear. Caroline's mother, Barbara, noticed her daughter's unease. Though dazzled by Nicholas's fortune, Barbara maintained a protective watch over her only child. During a quiet brunch at the Central Park boathouse, Barbara asked, "Is everything okay between you two? You look worried." Caroline sighed, remembering the promises she and Nicholas had exchanged: unconditional support, a partnership in triumph and trouble. "He's stressed with work," she replied diplomatically. "He'll come around." Yet her faith wavered. One evening, she discovered Nicholas whispering urgently into his phone, pacing the hallway like a caged animal. The moment he spotted her, he ended the call abruptly. "Just business," he claimed, but his guarded eyes suggested otherwise. In an attempt to rekindle their newlywed glow, Caroline planned a small dinner party inviting Nicholas's best friend, Mark Thompson, and Mark's fiancée, Hannah. They were the closest Nicholas had to confidants. The evening began pleasantly enough. Fine wine, candlelit conversation, shared laughter about escapades from college. But Nicholas remained uncharacteristically quiet. Caroline glanced at him, silently pleading for him to open up. He only smiled at her, a strained, hollow gesture that set her heart pounding with dread. The dinner party ended on a jarring note that evening. As Mark and Hannah gathered their coats to leave, Caroline noticed their worried glances dart toward Nicholas. Earlier in the night, he had remained unusually quiet, contributing little more than a forced smile or a distracted nod whenever conversation turned to the wedding. Ordinarily, Nicholas loved entertaining. He relished banter about new ventures or market trends, and his laughter would fill the room with a contagious warmth. But tonight, His silence was an echo chamber of tension, a warning sign that not all was well behind the pristine facade of newlywed life. Caroline tried to brush off her concerns. She reminded herself that she was still in a whirlwind of post-wedding excitement, adjusting to life as Mrs. Alden in a marble-floored penthouse. It was possible Nicholas was simply overworked. After all, his phone rang incessantly, time zones colliding in a flurry of international deals. Yet as she tidied the living room, gathering empty wine glasses and half-eaten canapes, she couldn't shake the unease settling in her stomach. Something was off, and she had no clue how dark it might get. The following afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind Manhattan's skyscrapers, Lucia Marconi's long-awaited email arrived. Caroline nearly dropped her latte in excitement upon seeing the subject line, "Your wedding photos final gallery." The sense of relief was almost tangible. Finally, here was something to bring Nicholas out of his funk. These photos, vivid, emotive snapshots from their special day, had been meticulously captured by one of the most sought-after photographers in the country. This was the last piece of the wedding puzzle, the final token of a perfect moment. Caroline immediately texted Nicholas. "Caroline, Lucia just sent the wedding gallery. Let's look at them tonight." She waited for his response, clutching her phone, but as minutes turned into an hour, there was nothing, no reply, no call. Setting aside her disappointment, she decided she would show him in person when he came home. After all, how could he resist reliving the happiest day of their lives? Yet, when Nicholas finally stepped through the door, he looked exhausted and distracted, as if some invisible weight pressed on his shoulders. He dropped his briefcase by the entryway without a word of greeting. Caroline approached him gently, placing a hand on his arm. "Nicholas," she said softly, summoning her warmest smile. The photographer sent everything. He mumbled a vague acknowledgement while thumbing through his phone, eyes darting over emails. Caroline swallowed her apprehension. "Should we watch the slideshow tonight?" Nicholas finally looked up, though his expression bordered on irritation. "I'm busy," he said curtly. She felt a pang of hurt. Busy with what? He offered no explanation, and an uneasy silence settled between them. After a moment's pause, he seemed to relent. With a sigh, he set down his phone and walked over to the plush sofa that faced the massive windows overlooking the city. Caroline followed, her heart fluttering with cautious optimism. She perched beside him, opening her laptop and navigating to Lucia's link. Music lilted through the speakers, a gentle piano piece. The slideshow began, images of Caroline slipping into her gown, her mother fastening a delicate pearl necklace around her neck, Nicholas waiting at the altar with an almost boyish grin. Caroline stole a glance at him, hoping to see a flicker of nostalgia or joy in his eyes. But his jaw was set, his gaze distant, as though each photo was a burden rather than a memory. Halfway through the montage, where they exchanged rings and laughter danced in the background, Nicholas suddenly stiffened. Without warning, he leaned forward, paused the slideshow, and slammed the laptop shut with a force that made Caroline jump. "We're not doing this," he muttered, a tremor in his voice she hadn't heard before. Alarmed, Caroline sat up straight. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice edged with worry. "Nicholas, these are our wedding photos." "Why would you?" he cut her off. "I'm deleting them." It took her a moment to process the gravity of his words. Deleting them? Her breath caught. She reached out to touch his arm, but he recoiled as though burned. "Nicholas, you can't. These photos mean everything. They're the memories of our vows, our families. They're meaningless," he snapped, standing up so fast that the laptop nearly slid off his lap. "Just drop it, Caroline. I can't look at them." His sudden outburst startled her. Tears prickled at the edges of her eyes, but a numb shock quickly replaced any urge to cry. "You can't be serious," she whispered, her voice hollow. "They're our wedding pictures." Nicholas looked at her then, and for a fleeting second, his face was awash in a pain she couldn't decipher: anger, regret, shame, or all three at once. He opened his mouth to speak, but seemed at a loss for words. Instead, he inhaled sharply, grabbed the laptop, and stormed into his study, slamming the door behind him. Caroline stared at the closed door, her chest tight. Her mind raced with questions, but one rose above all: what could possibly compel him to erase one of the happiest moments of their lives? The answer, she feared, was more disturbing than she dared imagine. And as she stood there, the golden light of sunset fading behind the skyline, a chill swept over her, as if foreshadowing the storm about to shatter every illusion she held dear. "Nicholas, what do you mean you're deleting them?" Caroline's voice cracked, sharp as splintering ice. A cold dread began to snake around her heart as she stared at the man she had married just weeks ago. The love of her life, her best friend, was now poised to annihilate the very memories she held dearest. She reached out, placing a trembling hand on his arm, but he jerked away with such force that she stumbled. His expression, once so warm, was contorted with something between anger and desperation. He paced back and forth across the living room, the soles of his expensive loafers squeaking against the polished marble floor. Each step seemed to reverberate in Caroline's chest, matching the frantic tempo of her heartbeat. She had seen him stressed before, usually over business deals or a frantic schedule, but never this unhinged, this lost. "Nicholas, talk to me," she pleaded, her voice threading with concern. "This isn't like you." He froze, turning to face her. His reflection in the mirrored coffee table revealed eyes on the verge of panic, as though haunted by ghosts only he could see. I just can't look at them anymore," he snapped, tone wavering. "That's not a reason," she shouted back, tears beginning to blur her vision. The significance of their wedding album flared through her mind, priceless snapshots of her walking down the aisle, the soft waver of Nicholas's voice as he said "I do," the waves of laughter during their first dance. A swirl of white organza, the sparkle of chandeliers, the promise of forever. Caroline took a steadying breath, forcing him to meet her gaze. "There are wedding photos, Nicholas. The day we vowed to love each other. You're talking about wiping away a part of who we are, don't you understand that?" For a moment, a flicker of indecision crossed his features. She sensed that a part of him hated what he was about to do. Perhaps he was wrestling with his conscience, torn between fear and the memory of his love for her. But then, as though remembering something more powerful than his guilt, his jaw clenched tight. Without another word, Nicholas stalked back to the open laptop that Caroline had left on the coffee table. His fingers hammered the keys in a flurry of keystrokes. The slideshow of their wedding froze mid-frame, capturing Caroline's radiant smile as she turned toward the crowd of cheering guests. Within seconds, the gallery disappeared, replaced by an empty screen. Nicholas's focus never wavered. He navigated to the computer's recycle bin and emptied it too, ensuring no digital trace could remain. "Stop!" Caroline cried, rushing forward to grab his wrist. She fumbled, catching only the edge of his sleeve. "Don't do this. Please, those are the only copies on our device. They're everything." Her voice broke, fresh tears slipping down her cheeks. But it was too late. Nicholas pressed the final confirmation, and the screen's soft glow dimmed, reflecting only Caroline's tear-streaked face. The photos were gone. An entire chapter of their lives, documented by Lucia Marconi's masterful lens, was wiped out in an instant. Caroline's knees threatened to buckle. She clung to the back of a leather chair for balance, struggling to catch her breath. Part of her wanted to scream, another part wanted to drop to her knees and sob. Instead, she forced herself to look at Nicholas, to demand answers. "Why?" she whispered, her voice trembling with both fury and heartbreak. "Why would you do this to us?" He shook his head, avoiding her tearful gaze. "I can't explain right now. Trust me, it's better this way." She tried to steady her breathing, struggling to think logically. His evasive answers and the urgency in his gestures suggested there was more at stake than just a temper tantrum. but the pain and confusion she felt overshadowed any empathy. "Better for who?" she managed, voice raw. "Because it sure isn't better for me. All I see is you throwing away the happiest memories I've ever had like they mean nothing." Nicholas swallowed hard, as if her words had hit him straight in the gut. For a heartbeat, Caroline thought he might relent, offer an olive branch, or at least give some rationale that she could cling to. But then he turned away. The light from the overhead chandelier caught the glint of sweat on his brow, and she realized just how agitated he truly was. "You'll have to trust me," he repeated, quieter this time, as though he lacked the energy for another outburst. "Please, Caroline, it's better that those pictures are gone." She stared at him, grappling with a surge of hurt. Her heart twisted painfully in her chest as she recalled the months of planning, the carefully chosen floral arrangements, the heartfelt speeches. All of it meticulously recorded, and now all of it gone. What on earth could be so terrible that Nicholas Alden, a man who prized success and public image, felt compelled to purge his own wedding photos? Tears streamed unchecked down her face as she wrapped her arms around herself in a futile attempt at self-comfort. She stood motionless, a silent observer to the destruction of her treasured memories. Only moments ago, she believed this night would be an intimate celebration, a chance to relive their wedding day. Now, the penthouse felt like a graveyard of unspoken truths. Nicholas lingered a few feet away, caught between wanting to console her and needing to escape. The turmoil in his eyes was unmistakable, but it offered no solace. Finally, in a hesitant step, he reached out as if to brush her tear-stained cheek. Caroline instinctively flinched, and that was enough to make him drop his hand. "Caroline," he began, voice cracking with regret, but no further words came. No apologies, no reassurances. She bit her trembling lower lip and said nothing. A heavy silence followed, thick with more questions than answers. She felt as though they stood on opposite sides of a chasm that had opened at their feet. At last, Nicholas turned and retreated to his study, shutting the door behind him with a grim finality. The echo of it reverberated in the cavernous space, underscoring the distance between them. Caroline sank onto the sofa, her hands pressed to her face. Beneath her fingertips, fresh tears came in relentless waves. The betrayal felt surreal. She remembered how Nicholas's eyes once sparkled with love when he looked at her in her wedding gown, how his voice wavered during the vows, how he promised to cherish her forever. Now, in a single impulsive act, he had erased what should have been their eternal keepsake. A knot formed in her throat as she realized she no longer recognized the man behind that door. Outside, the New York skyline twinkled with false promises, and the neon glow of the city seemed to mock her pain. She wondered if this was how illusions died, not with explosive revelations, but with unspoken words and irreversible keystrokes that robbed her of the very memories she once held dear. Something dark, she sensed, had taken root in their marriage, and as she stared at the blank laptop screen where her wedding photos used to be, Caroline knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Word spread quickly among their closest friends and family that Nicholas had destroyed the wedding photos. Caroline's mother called incessantly, her concern laced with anger at Nicholas's inexplicable behavior. Mark Thompson, who often served as Nicholas's sounding board, cornered him at the golf club they frequented. But each time someone prodded him, Nicholas only grew more withdrawn, offering curt explanations that satisfied no one. In an attempt to salvage whatever memories she could, Caroline reached out to Lucia Marconi. Perhaps there were backup files, something saved to the cloud or to a spare hard drive. Lucia responded apologetically. Of course, she had backups, but Nicholas had personally contacted her, insisting on their permanent deletion. He had even offered to pay triple her usual fee. Thoroughly confused, Lucia had demanded a reason. Nicholas only repeated, "It's a personal matter. Don't question it." Afraid of legal complications, given the contract they'd signed, Lucia complied. The only copies that survived were those in Caroline's physically printed album. In those uncertain days, a subtle change took hold in Caroline. She realized that if Nicholas was capable of such an extreme act, there might be more secrets he was hiding. Questions she never dared to ask before began swirling in her mind. Had he really acquired all his wealth through honest means? Why did calls from unknown numbers come at odd hours, sending him rushing out of the room? And, most importantly, what was it about their wedding day that he found so unbearable to remember? Caroline's suspicions intensified when she stumbled upon a cryptic email in Nicholas's inbox. He had left his laptop open one morning, and a single subject line caught her eye: urgent, we need to settle this. The sender was someone named Harrison Wu, based in Hong Kong. Caroline recognized the name as a business associate of Nicholas, someone he had mentioned in passing, praising his cunning in deal negotiations. Fighting the urge to pry, Caroline hovered her mouse over the email. Her heart hammered in her chest. She felt the moral dilemma deeply. Nicholas was her husband. She should trust him. But her trust had been eroded by his actions. Everything about him felt like a puzzle, missing key pieces. She clicked. The email read like a half-veiled threat. References to large sums of money owed, deadlines, and an unsettling suggestion that secrets would come out if payments weren't made on time. Caroline's stomach churned. This didn't sound like a typical business arrangement. It sounded like blackmail or something dangerously close to it. Before she could read further, Nicholas's footsteps echoed in the hallway. Panicking, she closed the email and busied herself in the kitchen. When Nicholas entered, his face appeared drawn. He didn't mention the laptop, but a sense of tension filled the air, as if he sensed her intrusion. That evening, Caroline looked at the solitary, printed wedding album on her bedside table. She wondered if their marriage was yet another elaborate facade, like the grand parties and the gilded mansion, doomed to crumble under the weight of hidden truths. The following week brought an unexpected revelation. Caroline discovered she was pregnant. In the midst of turmoil, the news of a child sparked a glimmer of hope within her. Despite everything, she still loved Nicholas and believed that perhaps this new life could anchor them in a renewed sense of unity. She decided to share the news during a quiet dinner at home, an intimate meal she prepared herself. Lately, they had been living like strangers occupying the same space. Caroline wanted to break that barrier, to offer something pure and undeniable, the promise of a family. When Nicholas arrived, he looked exhausted. The day's strain was evident in his slumped shoulders. As he loosened his tie, Caroline gently took his hand. I have something to tell you. He studied her, a slight frown on his lips, as if bracing for more bad news. What is it? Caroline smiled, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. We're going to have a baby. For a moment she saw flickers of joy in his expression, an unguarded softness that reminded her of the man she'd fallen in love with. He embraced her, pressing his forehead against hers. Her heart soared, believing this could be the turning point, but then, almost as quickly as it appeared, the joy evaporated. Nicholas pulled away, a haunted look returning to his eyes. He muttered something about needing fresh air and stepped out onto the balcony, leaving Caroline with the most devastating sense of whiplash she'd ever experienced. Caroline's mind raced. She watched Nicholas through the glass doors as he leaned on the balcony railing, staring at the city skyline like a lost soul. She was torn between rushing to comfort him and preserving her own fragile composure. Ultimately, she joined him outside, bracing against the cool evening breeze. Nicholas, she said gently, tell me what's going on. I'm your wife. We're having a baby together. I deserve to know. He remained silent, his gaze fixed on the distant lights of Manhattan's skyscrapers. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken truths. Finally, he swallowed hard. Caroline, I'm in trouble. Her stomach twisted. Trouble with what? Work? Debt? He turned, and for the first time she saw genuine fear in his eyes. All of it, he admitted, voice trembling with a vulnerability she'd never heard before. Some deals I've made, they're not legal. I owe money to people who don't ask twice. If I don't come up with it soon, everything will fall apart. Caroline's chest tightened. She thought of the lavish lifestyle, the extravagance of their wedding, the infinite swirl of credit cards and private jets. Her mind reeled. Had it all been a mirage? Is that why you deleted the photos? She asked, heart pounding. You thought? He exhaled shakily. It's complicated. But if certain people found out details, our wedding, the connections I made there, he broke off. I was protecting you. I thought if I erased certain evidence, I could keep you out of it. Nicholas's admission left Caroline reeling. The man she adored, the father of her unborn child, was entangled in something far more sinister than she ever imagined. As he leaned on the balcony rail, he spoke in fragmented confessions, a bad investment here, a questionable partnership there. Over time, these decisions had snowballed. He now faced massive debts to dangerous individuals, some linked to Hong Kong's underworld, others right there in New York's shady corners of finance. Caroline's hand instinctively went to her abdomen, where new life quietly flourished. A mixture of anger and empathy surged within her. On one hand, she felt betrayed Nicholas had woven a web of deceit that ensnared her life as well. On the other, she recognized the desperation that might drive a proud man to hide such ruinous secrets. He believed that by deleting photos, severing certain social links, or paying off whoever threatened him, he could control the damage. Over the next hour, they talked more openly than they had in months. Nicholas confessed he had once borrowed a significant sum from a loan shark in Hong Kong, hoping to flip it quickly in a high-stakes investment. When that failed, he promised future returns, forging documents to reassure his lenders. The wedding had been a public display of his continued success. But if these lenders discovered the truth that his fortune was more precarious than he let on, Caroline could become a pawn in their threats. By the time they returned inside, dawn was breaking, illuminating the penthouse with a cold, unforgiving light. Caroline woke later that morning feeling as though an avalanche of secrets had just buried her. Nicholas was gone. He'd left early for an emergency meeting. A note on the kitchen counter read, "Need to fix this. Back soon. Love you." Staring at the words, she realized love and deception could indeed coexist, tangled in a complicated dance. She spent most of that day alone, grappling with the weight of Nicholas's revelations. Could she stand by him, knowing the extent of his lies and financial misconduct? Was it possible that love, especially now, when a child was involved, could redeem him? Turning to the only solace she could think of, Caroline found herself flipping through the physical wedding album in her dressing room. The photos were more precious now, knowing they were the last tangible record of that day. Each page told a story of laughter and promise, reminding her of a time she believed in fairy tale endings. By evening, Caroline decided she would try to support Nicholas. Yet she was determined not to be naive or complicit. She would demand honesty, even if it wounded them both. And she resolved to protect her unborn child at all costs. Sitting at the vanity mirror, she whispered a silent vow, echoing the love she'd once confessed in front of hundreds of guests. "I will fight for our family, but I won't lose myself in the process." Little did she know, her resolve would soon be tested far beyond anything she could imagine. Life took on a strange rhythm after Nicholas's confession. On the surface, Caroline tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy. She attended prenatal checkups, politely declined invitations to high society events, and occupied her days with activities that felt safe, like reading up on parenting or visiting art galleries incognito to reconnect with her old passions. Nicholas, in contrast, became increasingly secretive again. He claimed to be tying up loose ends, making deals that would free him from his debts. But each day he returned home more hollow than before, as though he left pieces of himself behind in every negotiation or confrontation. Amid this tension, a curious development arose. Caroline's former professor at Yale, Dr. Elaine Whitcomb, reached out. She had heard of Caroline's expertise in art history and wanted her help curating a private collection for a new museum in Brooklyn. The job was a dream, legitimate, fulfilling, and an escape from the suffocating environment of Nicholas's financial fiascos. Intrigued, Caroline met with Dr. Whitcomb and found herself re-energized by the world she once loved. The position would offer a steady income, a sense of purpose, and perhaps a means to secure her own independence if Nicholas's world collapsed entirely. Yet, as she mulled over the offer, she hesitated. Could she commit to a job when her marriage was on the brink and her pregnancy demanded stability? She realized her decision might become a critical pivot in her life, a step towards self-reliance in a relationship overshadowed by secrets. Not long after Dr. Whitcomb's offer, Caroline confronted Nicholas about her plans. They were seated at the long mahogany dining table that rarely saw use these days, each lost in their own swirl of thoughts. Outside, rain lashed against the penthouse windows in a relentless downpour, mirroring the storm inside their marriage. "I've been offered a curating job," Caroline said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I want to take it." Nicholas looked up from the paperwork he was sorting, documents that likely involved the precarious deals he was orchestrating. "A job? Where?" "Brooklyn," Caroline replied, bracing for his disapproval. "It's a project to curate a new museum's private art collection. I studied for this. It's my passion." He set his papers aside. The flicker of the overhead chandelier cast deep shadows on his face, making it difficult to read his expression. Finally, he nodded. "Caroline, the first want you to do what makes you happy." The sincerity in his tone shocked her. This was the Nicholas she remembered, the one who had encouraged her aspirations before money became the center of their universe. Tears pricked her eyes. "Are you sure?" He reached for her hand, his grip surprisingly firm. "I can't give you stability right now, but I refuse to let you postpone your dreams any longer. If this is important to you, then yes, go for it." For a fleeting moment, Caroline felt hope blossom. Perhaps in forging her own path, she could find the strength to help Nicholas too. Accepting the curating position brought Caroline a newfound sense of purpose. She threw herself into the role, researching Renaissance masters, modern art innovators, and lesser-known but transformative movements. Days melted into evenings as she sorted through potential acquisitions and negotiated loans from private collectors. Meanwhile, Nicholas's finances seemed to hover in a state of limbo, neither improving nor deteriorating to the point of catastrophe. He spent more time at the office or in clandestine meetings, returning home emotionally exhausted. Yet, on occasion, Caroline glimpsed a quiet determination in him, an unspoken resolve to set things right before the baby arrived. Then, in the early hours of one morning, a phone call jolted them awake. Caroline's heart pounded when Nicholas answered. She couldn't catch the words exchanged, but the tension in his voice sent chills through her. After the brief conversation, he sat up, shoulders rigid. "I have to go," he said, throwing on a shirt and pants in record time. When Caroline pressed for an explanation, he offered only half answers about a deal that had to be finalized, about how this could be the break he needed. Without another word, he darted out of the penthouse, leaving Caroline in a swirl of dread. Hours passed. Caroline called repeatedly, only to reach voicemail each time. She couldn't quell visions of Nicholas cornered by loan sharks, forced into signing something catastrophic, or worse, vanishing into the night. By the time dawn broke, She had never felt more alone or frightened. Nicholas returned just after sunrise, dishevelled and pale. The sight of him stumbling through the door, clothes wrinkled, hair matted from sweat, made Caroline's heart lurch. She rushed to him, relief and anger battling within her. "What happened?" she demanded. "Where were you all night?" He slumped onto the sofa, rubbing his temples. "I negotiated," he breathed, "with Harrison Wu. We signed an agreement that gives me 6 months to repay the debt. If I default, they take everything." Caroline crouched before him, searching his eyes. "Everything? The penthouse? Our savings?" He nodded, tears glistening but not falling. "And more. My entire portfolio, the properties in Europe, the trust I set up gone." She swallowed hard, simultaneously relieved he was alive and devastated by the precarious path they walked. "But at least you have 6 months," Nicholas exhaled shakily. "Yes, but if I fail," Harrison hinted that our family, could become leverage. "These aren't the kind of people who play by legal rules." Caroline reached for his hand, pressing it against her belly, where life quietly stirred. "We won't let it come to that," she whispered, though her voice trembled with uncertainty. At that moment, the weight of the unborn child's future pressed upon them both. They had to succeed in outrunning the consequences of Nicholas's mistakes, or risk losing everything they'd built, including the safety of the next generation. Yet a growing fear gnawed at Caroline's soul. How far would Nicholas go to protect them, and would she be able to live with the cost? In the midst of these escalating pressures, Caroline made an unsettling discovery. She had been rummaging through the storage closet in search of a painting Nicholas once mentioned, a piece by an obscure Flemish artist that might interest her museum colleagues, when she stumbled across a hidden canvas. Carefully wrapped in cloth, it bore no signature on the outside. Curious, Caroline unwrapped it and gasped. The painting was a portrait of her, a spitting image of Caroline, seated in the very living room where Nicholas had deleted their wedding photos. But this wasn't a depiction of joy or romance. The figure in the portrait was pregnant, tears carving paths down her cheeks, her hands cupped around her belly in a gesture that suggested both protection and despair. The brushstrokes were raw and haunting, capturing pain so vividly that Caroline felt her heart race. She had no memory of posing for such an image. Examining the style, she recognized the techniques of Conrad de Ville, a controversial artist known for painting raw human emotion. De Ville rarely took commissions, and his work commanded astronomical sums among the elite. Why would Nicholas commission a painting of her crying? A sick realization formed in her mind. Nicholas had chosen to preserve this heart-wrenching moment rather than their wedding day. The irony was unbearable. He had deleted images of happiness, yet he'd paid a fortune for an image of sorrow to hang in secret. Confused and shaken, Caroline wrapped the portrait back up, her thoughts whirling with new suspicions. Confrontation was inevitable. That evening, Caroline laid the painting on the living room sofa, waiting for Nicholas to return. The moment he entered, his face paled at the sight of the hidden masterpiece revealed. "Why?" Caroline demanded, her voice trembling with hurt. "Why commission a portrait of me like this, crying, pregnant?" "It's twisted, Nicholas." He remained silent for a painfully long stretch, running a hand over his mouth. Finally he answered, "I wanted to capture the truth of what I've done to you, to us." He took a hesitant step forward. "I've always admired Conrad de Ville's ability to paint raw emotion. I felt I deserved to be haunted by this." She stared at him, tears stinging her eyes. "So instead of preserving our happy memories, you've immortalized my heartbreak?" Nicholas's voice shook as he spoke. "I'm not proud of it. But when I think about the wedding pictures, I think about the lies, the deals I'd made to pay for that absurd extravagance, the debts we were already drowning in. Every smiling face in those photos felt like a dagger of guilt to me. But this," he gestured at the portrait, "this is honest. It's what I've turned you into. A woman who should be glowing with joy, but instead is forced to cry. Caroline's breath hitched. She saw the torment etched on Nicholas's face and recognized a glimmer of regret that words couldn't convey. Still, she wondered if this self-flagellation was enough to save them, or if it would only deepen the wounds. News of Caroline's pregnancy gradually became public, and with it came a renewed interest in the Alden household. Society columns speculated about lavish baby showers and the heir to Nicholas Alden's fortune. Only Caroline knew how tenuous that fortune truly was. Her job at the museum became an increasingly vital escape. She found comfort among the timeless works that spoke of human triumphs and tragedies. In the evenings, she would return home to a husband who oscillated between desperate business calls and silent moments of reflection. Their relationship felt more like a fragile truce than a partnership, each careful not to push the other over a precipice. Despite this emotional distance, a single thread of unity remained: the unborn child. Every prenatal appointment, Nicholas accompanied her, holding her hand, anxiously awaiting the doctor's updates. These small glimpses of paternal devotion gave Caroline a flicker of hope that somewhere beneath his layers of guilt and fear, Nicholas still prioritized their family's well-being. Then came the complication. At a routine checkup, the doctor expressed concern about Caroline's elevated stress levels and potential hypertension. "You need to rest," he warned. "Stress isn't good for you or the baby." Caroline glanced at Nicholas, who wore a mask of concern and self-reproach. She knew that the chaos surrounding them was harming not just their marriage, but the life within her. Determined to protect her child, Caroline resolved to take every precaution, even if it meant extracting herself from Nicholas's world of endless turmoil. As her due date inched closer, Caroline retreated into a quieter routine. She scaled back her work hours at the museum begrudgingly at first, but Dr. Whitcomb and her obstetrician insisted. Nicholas, sensing her vulnerability, tried to shield her from his ongoing financial battles. He rarely mentioned Harrison Wu or the looming deadline, yet the tension in his demeanor betrayed that time was running out. One afternoon, while Caroline rested in the nursery, they were preparing a soft pastel room with a white crib and plush toys. Nicholas slipped in quietly. She looked up to see him examining a tiny pair of baby shoes on the dresser. "Do you think it's a boy or a girl?" he asked, voice subdued. She smiled faintly. "We decided to keep it a surprise, remember?" He nodded, tracing the embroidered design on the shoes. "I just want this child to have everything, a stable life." Caroline swallowed. Despite their fractured relationship, her heart softened. "So do I," she said gently. "And that starts with honesty, Nicholas." He grimaced, turning away. "I'm meeting a potential investor next week. If it goes well, maybe I can buy out Wu's debt. If it doesn't..." He left the sentence hanging. Caroline knew the unspoken end. They'd lose everything and potentially invite dangerous retaliation. As Nicholas walked out, she felt tears slip down her cheeks. It was excruciating, loving someone who was both her greatest protector and the source of her deepest insecurity. True to his word, Nicholas pursued a last-ditch deal with a mysterious Middle Eastern investor, rumored to have a penchant for rescuing failing empires at a cost. Mark Thompson arranged the introduction, promising it was their best shot. Caroline, hopeful but wary, awaited the outcome with bated breath. Days later, Nicholas came home in the middle of the night, unannounced. Caroline, half asleep, heard him rummaging through a desk drawer. She found him stuffing documents into a briefcase, hands trembling. When she flicked on the lights, he startled, dropping a folder. "What's going on?" she asked, heart pounding. "It's the final negotiation," he whispered hoarsely, eyes avoiding hers. "I have to leave for Dubai tonight. If I can secure this investment, Wu's leverage over us is gone." Caroline placed a hand on his arm. "Let me come with you. I can't bear sitting here, not knowing what's happening." Nicholas shook his head firmly. No, you need rest. The baby's almost here. I won't risk stressing you. His voice cracked. Don't you see? Everything I'm doing, no matter how misguided, is for you and our child. I won't drag you into more chaos. Tears blurred Caroline's vision. She saw the conflict raging within him, the need to protect versus the guilt of leaving her behind. In the end, she nodded, recognizing that any argument might worsen the stress they both carried. So she let him go, praying silently that the man who returned from Dubai would bring a chance for redemption rather than another wave of devastation. The week Nicholas spent in Dubai felt like an eternity. Caroline's anxiety spiraled with each passing day, exacerbated by her advancing pregnancy. Nights were filled with restless dreams of Nicholas trapped in shadowy boardrooms, signing away his soul to faceless creditors. To cope, Caroline busied herself by finalizing details in the nursery. She also wrapped up pending tasks at the museum, prepared for maternity leave, and visited Dr. Whitcomb, who advised her to remain calm. Each time her phone buzzed, she prayed it was Nicholas calling with good news. Finally, on a sweltering Wednesday afternoon, her phone rang. Nicholas's voice came through, exhausted yet triumphant. "It's done," he said. "I got the investment. Enough to settle Wu's debt." Caroline nearly collapsed with relief. "So we're safe now? No more threats?" Nicholas paused before responding. "Safer than before, yes. But the investor demanded a large equity stake in my companies. We'll have to scale back a lot." Caroline didn't care about scaling back. She only cared that they were free from the looming shadow that threatened their child's future. She told him she loved him, that she was proud he pulled them out of the fire. For the first time in months, she felt a renewed sense of hope. But as she ended the call, her gaze fell on the hidden portrait by Conrad de Ville, which she had since hung in a private corner of the penthouse. The image of her crying, pregnant self stood as a stark reminder that wounds like theirs don't heal overnight. Nicholas returned from Dubai a changed man. The tension etched on his face had eased, replaced by cautious optimism. He spoke of consolidating his remaining businesses, clearing out toxic partnerships, and focusing on what truly mattered: his family. Caroline watched him closely, torn between hope and the lingering sting of betrayal. He had orchestrated a life of lies and illusions, jeopardizing their future. Yet here he was, making real efforts to atone. In the following days, Nicholas sold off several luxury properties, including an opulent villa in the south of France and a prized penthouse in Tokyo. His personal staff was reduced to a single part-time assistant, and the household budget was tightened significantly. Friends in high society circles gossiped about financial troubles, but Nicholas no longer seemed to care about gossip. His priorities had shifted. With each passing week, Caroline's belly grew, and the baby's kicks became a new source of wonder. Nicholas began accompanying her to routine checkups again, sometimes surprising her with little gifts: a handcrafted rocking chair for the nursery, a first-edition art book for her personal collection. Late one evening, they found themselves in the nursery, quietly assembling the crib together. There was a serene hush as they worked, side by side. A memory of their wedding drifted into Caroline's mind, the way Nicholas had gently held her hand during their first dance, promising a future brimming with happiness. Tears gathered in her eyes as she realized that despite everything, she still believed in that promise. In her final month of pregnancy, Caroline awoke one night to piercing pain in her abdomen. At first, she dismissed it as routine discomfort, but soon realized the contractions were coming fast and strong. Nicholas, startled from sleep, scrambled into action. He grabbed the hospital bag Caroline had carefully packed weeks ago, ushering her to their waiting car with trembling urgency. At the hospital, doctors confirmed she was in labor earlier than expected, but the baby seemed healthy enough to make its entrance. Hours turned into an agonizing vigil. Caroline clutched Nicholas's hand through every contraction, drawing on his encouragement. In the corridor, Barbara arrived in a flurry, tears of worry and excitement in her eyes. Despite the pain, Caroline felt an inexplicable sense of peace. This was the culmination of everything: love, betrayal, forgiveness, and hope manifesting in the birth of a new life. Nicholas, tears glistening, whispered apologies for the darkness he had brought into their world. After an exhausting labor, the baby's cry resonated through the delivery room. A nurse placed a tiny, wriggling bundle into Caroline's arms. Tears streamed down her face as she gazed at their newborn child, a boy, perfect in every delicate feature. Nicholas brushed his lips against Caroline's forehead, whispering, "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure he never sees the mistakes I made." Caroline nodded, overwhelmed by relief and love. In that moment, the portrait of her crying felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the radiant future in her arms. Life after the baby's arrival was far from flawless, but it was undeniably real. Nicholas found immense joy in holding his son named Daniel after Caroline's late father and feeding him in the early mornings. Gone were the ceaseless business calls at odd hours. In their place came late-night lullabies and diaper changes. Of course, challenges remained. The massive debt repayment had set them back financially, forcing them to give up certain luxuries. They downsized to a more modest townhouse, selling the penthouse to clear lingering obligations. Tabloids whispered about the fall of a millionaire, but those close to the Oldens saw a couple determined to rebuild from the rubble of past mistakes. Caroline returned to her museum job on a flexible schedule, balancing her career and motherhood with newfound purpose. The Conrad de Ville portrait found a new home in their living room, an unusual choice, some might say, for a place often filled with baby coos, but Caroline insisted on displaying it. Every time she glanced at her painted, tear-streaked face, she remembered the dark days they overcame. It was a testament to survival, a memento that not all precious things are born of sunshine. Sometimes, heartbreak can be the canvas on which we paint our deepest truths. As for the wedding photos, the printed album remained tucked away in a simple wooden box. Caroline no longer flipped through it obsessively. After all, the real proof of their journey, both its heartbreak and its redemption, no longer needed photographs. It lived, breathing and cooing, in their arms. In the end, Nicholas and Caroline learned that true love is far from picture perfect. It's forged in trials, confessions, and the determination to stand by each other, even when shadows threaten to engulf every cherished dream. Their story, once defined by a wealthy man's dramatic act of deleting wedding photos, evolved into a powerful tale of redemption. It showed that sometimes heartbreak needs to be confronted head-on and immortalized, like the painting of Caroline's tears, so the lessons can guide us toward hope. If you found yourself swept up in this journey of secrets, betrayal, and renewal, please show your support by liking this video, sharing it with friends who appreciate a heartfelt drama, and subscribing to stay updated on more stirring tales. Together, let's keep the conversation alive and explore the complexities of love, loss, and the ultimate power of forgiveness.